My name is Luke, and I'm going to tell you the story of the most complicated year of my life. A story about how I discovered the truth about my wife Emily and my best friend Kyle, and how I decided to make them pay. It all started with a phone call at 3 in the morning. Mr. Richards? This is St. Mary's Hospital. Your wife has been in an accident. I rushed to the hospital, my heart pounding like crazy. But when I arrived, they told me there was no Emily Richards in their system. That there had been no accident. Someone had played a cruel joke on me. Returning home at 4 in the morning, I found a note from Emily. Went to Mom's in Detroit. She's not well. We'll be back in a week. Love you. But her mother had died 3 years ago. The next day I called her workplace. They told me Emily had taken 2 weeks vacation and gone to Hawaii with her husband. I had never planned to go to Hawaii. That's when I realized something was wrong. Very wrong. I began investigating my own life. I checked our joint bank accounts. It turned out that over the past 6 months, Emily had been withdrawing cash in small amounts. About $15,000 in total. I hired a private detective. That same day he called me at work. Mr. Richards, I have news for you. Your wife is currently at the Grand Hyatt Hotel with a man. But it's not you. What do you mean? She registered as Mrs. Emily Richards along with Mr. Kyle Richards. They filed marriage documents at the local city hall. The world turned upside down. Emily was trying to marry my best friend using my last name. They planned to do this while I thought she was on a business trip. But the most shocking part was yet to come. The detective continued, there's one more thing. According to the documents they filed, your wife is pregnant. 4 months along. 4 months. I tried to remember, had we made love 4 months ago? Yes, we had. But now I couldn't be sure who the father of this child was. I sat in my office looking at the photos the detective had brought. Emily and Kyle embracing at the altar in a small chapel. Emily in a white dress, Kyle in a tuxedo. Both smiling. They were playing wedding while I thought she was caring for her sick mother. But the worst part wasn't this. The worst part was that in one of the photos I saw a ring on Kyle's finger. My ring. The same one I had lost a month ago and which I thought was stolen at the gym. Emily had given my wedding ring to Kyle for their fake wedding. That night I didn't sleep. I planned. I thought through every step. If they wanted to play games, I would play a different game with them. The next morning I called my lawyer. Jake, I need your help. As soon as possible. What happened, Luke? My wife is trying to marry another man using false documents. Technically, this is bigamy and fraud. My God. Are you sure? I have photographs. Meanwhile, I hired an actor to play a police officer and came up with a plan. When Emily returned after a week, she acted as if nothing had happened. She told me about her sick mother, showed me fake photos from the hospital. How are things at work? I asked over dinner. Everything's fine. The boss is very understanding about family problems. And Kyle? Haven't seen him in a while. I don't know. Probably on a business trip. Every word was a lie. But I played my role. 2 days later it was time to act. Emily, I have to go to New York for a conference. For 3 days. All right, honey. Be careful. Of course I wasn't going anywhere. Instead, I sat in my car across from our house and waited. At 2 in the afternoon, Kyle arrived. But not alone. With him was a woman with documents. As it turned out later, she was a notary. They were planning to process some papers in our house. An hour later, I rang the doorbell. Kyle opened the door and turned white as a sheet. Hi, friend. You weren't expecting to see me? Look. Where's Emily? Emily came out of the kitchen. She had documents in her hands. Interesting, what kind of papers are those? I asked. Luke, we can explain everything. Oh, I'm sure you can. But first introduce me to your guest. The woman introduced herself as Notary Deborah Johnson. And what are you notarizing here? Silence. Well then I'll tell you myself. You're processing documents to transfer ownership of our house to Kyle's name. Correct. Emily and Kyle exchanged glances. How did you? How do I know? I know much more. I know about your fake wedding in Chicago. I know about the pregnancy. I know about the money you stole from our account. And I know about my wedding ring on Kyle's finger. Kyle instinctively hid his hand behind his back. Show me your hand, Kyle. Luke, let me explain. Show me your hand. He extended his hand. On his ring finger was my wedding ring. 20 years of friendship. 20 years. And you stole not only my wife but also my wedding ring for a fake wedding. It's not what you think. Then what is it? What is this, Emily? You're marrying my friend, pregnant by God knows who, stealing my money and trying to steal my house. Emily started crying. "The baby is yours, Luke. I swear. Your oaths mean nothing. You swore to be faithful to me 7 years ago." The notary started gathering documents. "I think I'd better leave." "No, stay. You'll be a witness." I took out my phone and dialed a number. "Officer Thompson? This is Luke Richards. Can you come over? I have evidence of fraud and attempted theft." "Luke, don't do this," Kyle begged. "Why not? You weren't ashamed to rob me." 15 minutes later, the police arrived. Real police, not actors. I showed them all the evidence. Photos of the fake wedding, bank statements, property transfer documents. "This is called marriage fraud, identity theft, and attempted property appropriation," the officer said. Emily and Kyle were arrested right in our living room. But this was just the beginning. The next 3 months were filled with court hearings. It turned out this wasn't Kyle's first scam. He had done something similar in another state with another woman. Emily was found guilty of marriage fraud and attempted theft. She received 2 years probation and had to return all the money. Kyle got 3 years in prison. But the cruelest punishment for Emily wasn't the court's decision. A month after the arrest, I hired a private detective to investigate Kyle's past. He discovered a shocking truth. Kyle was married. Had been for 5 years. His wife Stephanie lived in Oregon and knew nothing about his travels. I personally went to Stephanie and told her everything. I showed her photos, documents, evidence. Stephanie was in shock. But what shocked her most was what she learned. Kyle had done the same thing with her 5 years ago. He had been married to another woman when he fell in love with Stephanie. "He's a serial scammer," she told me. "He looks for married women, makes them fall in love with him, then robs them and their husbands." I told Emily this during one of our last conversations before the divorce. "Emily, you weren't a beloved woman. You were a target. Kyle is a serial scammer. He has a wife in Oregon. And you weren't the first or the last." Her face contorted with pain. "That's not true. Here are the documents. Here are photos of his wedding with Stephanie. 5 years ago. While he was playing lover with you, he was married to another woman. But he said he loved me." He said the same thing to Stephanie. And to the woman before her in Texas. He has a whole system. He finds unhappy married women, makes them fall in love, convinces them to steal money from their husbands, then disappears with the money. Emily realized she had been a puppet in the hands of a professional con artist. The most ironic part was that the child really turned out to be mine. The DNA test confirmed it. But I could no longer trust Emily. Even knowing the truth about Kyle, I couldn't forgive her for a year of lies. At the divorce hearing, I said my last words to her. "Emily, maybe you were a victim of a con artist. But you were also ready to destroy our life for a person you had known for only a year. You were ready to steal my money, my house, my life. Kyle used you, but you used me." The court awarded me full custody of the child after birth. Emily only received supervised visitation rights. Now, 2 years later, my daughter Olivia lives with me in Seattle. Emily is serving her probationary term, working as a cashier in a supermarket, trying to pay back the stolen money. Kyle is still in prison. His wife Stephanie filed for divorce and is also suing him. And I learned an important life truth. Sometimes the people we love most are capable of causing us the greatest pain. But justice, even if delayed, still exists. The best punishment for Emily wasn't prison. The best punishment was realizing that she had lost true love for fake love. That she had destroyed her own life for a person who never loved her. And I was left with the most important thing, my daughter, and the knowledge that I had done everything right. But let me tell you more about how this all unfolded, because the story goes much deeper than what I initially revealed. The first real sign something was wrong came 6 months before that phone call. Emily had started working late more often, claiming her marketing firm had landed a big client. She would come home at 9 or 10 at night, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. "It's probably from the elevator at work. You know how strong some people's cologne can be." I believed her because I loved her. Because after 7 years of marriage, I trusted her completely. Kyle had been my friend since college. We played basketball together, went to each other's weddings, shared our dreams and fears. He was the best man at my wedding, and I was supposed to be his when he found the right woman. Or so I thought. The second sign was more subtle. Emily started asking me questions about my work schedule, about my business trips, about when I would be home. At first, I thought she was just being a caring wife, wanting to plan our time together. "When is your next conference?" she would ask casually over breakfast. "Not until next month." "Why?" "Just wondering. I might plan something with the girls." Those, something with the girls, nights became more frequent. book club meetings that lasted until midnight, girls' nights out that required overnight stays, shopping trips that took entire weekends. I never questioned any of it because Emily had always been social. She had her own life, her own friends, and I respected that. The third sign was financial. Our joint checking account started showing unusual activity. Small withdrawals at ATMs across town, always when I was at work. When I asked Emily about them, she always had explanations. Oh, that was for lunch with Sarah. She forgot her wallet. I bought a gift for my sister's birthday. Cash was easier. The girls and I split a hotel room for the weekend trip. Each explanation made sense individually. Together they painted a picture I was too blind to see. Kyle's behavior changed too, though I didn't notice it at the time. Our weekly basketball games became monthly, then sporadic. When we did meet, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly. New girlfriend? I would tease him. Something like that, he would say with a smile that I now realize was full of guilt. He started asking about Emily more often. How was she doing? Was she happy? Did she ever mention feeling trapped in suburban life? I thought he was just being a good friend, concerned about our marriage the way single friends sometimes are. The fourth sign was intimacy. Emily and I had always had a good physical relationship, but over those months, it became less frequent. She was always too tired, too stressed from work, not feeling well. Maybe we should see a doctor, I suggested once. It's just work stress, she insisted. Once this big project is over, things will get back to normal. But things never got back to normal. Looking back now, I can see how carefully orchestrated everything was. Kyle would visit when I was at work, supposedly to drop off something or pick up something he had left. Emily would mention these visits casually. Kyle stopped by to get that book he lent you. Kyle dropped off some photos from the company picnic. Always innocent. Always explainable. The fake phone call about the accident was the breaking point, but it wasn't random. Later, I would learn that Kyle had made that call because Emily had told him I was getting suspicious. They needed to create chaos to throw me off their scent. The plan was for Emily to disappear for a week while Kyle established an alibi somewhere else. When she returned, they would have a story about her mother's sudden illness and recovery. Kyle would have photos from his business trip to Phoenix. But they underestimated me. When the detective first showed me the photos from their fake wedding, I felt like I was looking at strangers. The woman in the white dress looked like Emily, but she was glowing with happiness I hadn't seen on her face in months. The man in the tuxedo looked like Kyle, but he was holding her with a tenderness I had never seen him show any woman. They looked like they were genuinely in love. That's what hurt the most, not just that they had betrayed me, but that they seemed to have found something real with each other. Something that made them willing to destroy everything else in their lives. The detective had done more than just photograph their ceremony. He had followed them for 3 days, documenting their routines. They woke up together, had breakfast together, walked hand in hand through downtown Chicago. They looked like honeymooners. Which I supposed they were. The documents they had filed weren't just marriage certificates. They had opened joint bank accounts, applied for credit cards, even looked at apartments together. They were building a life using my name and my money. The pregnancy added another layer of complexity. Emily was indeed 4 months along, but the timing made paternity unclear. We had been intimate in that time frame, but so had she and Kyle. When I confronted them in our living room that day, seeing Kyle wearing my wedding ring was like a physical blow. That ring had belonged to my grandfather, then my father, then me. It represented generations of commitment and fidelity. Kyle had turned it into a prop in his con game. Emily's tears seemed genuine, but I had learned not to trust my judgment about her emotions. She had been crying on cue for months, whenever she needed to explain away another inconsistency in her stories. "Luke, you have to understand," she said as the police were putting handcuffs on her. "I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" I asked. She had no answer. The legal proceedings revealed the full scope of their plan. They hadn't just been having an affair, they had been systematically transferring assets. The house deed transfer was just the final step. They had already moved most of our savings to accounts I didn't know about. Kyle's criminal history was extensive. The woman in Texas, whose husband he had defrauded of nearly $50,000. The woman in Florida, whose identity he had stolen to open credit lines. The woman in California, whose mother's life insurance payout he had convinced her to invest with him. Emily wasn't his first victim and she wouldn't have been his last. But she was different from the others in one crucial way: she was willing to be an active participant in the fraud. The other women had been passive victims, manipulated and used. Emily had helped plan the deception. She knew exactly what she was doing, the prosecutor told me during one of our meetings. This wasn't a crime of passion or manipulation. This was calculated theft. The pregnancy became a focal point of the legal proceedings. Emily's lawyer argued that she couldn't be sent to prison while carrying a child. My lawyer argued that the child's paternity was in question and that Emily had used the pregnancy as part of her fraud. The DNA test results came back when Emily was 7 months pregnant. I was the father. That news hit me harder than I expected. 4 months, I had been preparing myself for the possibility that Kyle was the father, that I would lose everything including a child that wasn't even mine. Learning that Olivia was my daughter changed everything and nothing. I was relieved, but I was also terrified. How do you raise a child with someone you can never trust again? Emily's sentencing hearing was surreal. She sat in the defendant's chair, 8 months pregnant, wearing a conservative blue dress that made her look younger and more innocent than her 32 years. Your Honor, her lawyer said, my client was manipulated by a practiced con artist. She made mistakes, but she was as much a victim as anyone else. The prosecutor disagreed. Your Honor, the defendant actively participated in identity theft, bank fraud, and attempted property theft. She forged documents, lied to officials, and deceived her husband for over a year. This wasn't the act of a confused victim, this was the act of a willing criminal. Emily was given the opportunity to speak on her own behalf. Your Honor, I know I made terrible mistakes. I hurt the person I loved most in the world. But I was lonely and Kyle made me feel alive again. I never intended to steal anything. I just wanted to be happy. Mrs. Richards, the judge said, you stole $15,000 from your husband's accounts, attempted to transfer ownership of his house to your co-conspirator, and used false documents to enter into a fraudulent marriage. Your intentions may have started with seeking happiness, but your actions constituted serious crimes. She was sentenced to 2 years probation, full restitution of the stolen money, and supervised visitation with our daughter once she was born. Kyle's sentencing was harsher. With his history of similar crimes, he received 3 years in state prison and 5 years probation upon release. During his sentencing, he looked directly at me. Luke, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to. But I want you to know that what Emily and I had was real. It wasn't just a con. I really did love her. The judge cut him off. Mr. Thompson, this is not the time for romantic declarations. You have been convicted of serious felonies that have destroyed families and lives. But his words haunted me. If they really loved each other, did that make their betrayal worse or better? Does genuine feeling excuse criminal behavior? I never found a satisfactory answer to that question. Olivia was born 3 weeks after Emily's sentencing. I was in the delivery room, holding Emily's hand as she brought our daughter into the world. For those few hours, it almost felt like we were still a family. But as soon as Olivia was placed in Emily's arms, reality crashed back. The security guard at the door reminded me that Emily was still technically in custody. The social worker taking notes reminded me that this was a supervised visit. She's beautiful, Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face. Yes, she is, I agreed. Luke, I know I can't undo what I did. But please don't let her grow up hating me. I looked at my daughter, our daughter, and made a promise that surprised even me. I'll tell her the truth when she's old enough to understand it. But I'll also make sure she knows that despite everything, you loved her from the moment you knew she existed. Emily's probation officer arrived to escort her back to the halfway house where she was living. She kissed Olivia's forehead and handed her to me. Take care of her, she said. I will. That was the last meaningful conversation Emily and I ever had. Over the next year, Emily had her supervised visits every 2 weeks. She would arrive at the family court building, spend 2 hours with Olivia in a sterile room with toys and a social worker taking notes, then leave. She never asked about my life and I never volunteered information. We spoke only about Olivia, her health, her development, her needs. Emily got a job at a grocery store, working nights to accommodate her visitation schedule. She lived in a studio apartment across town, taking the bus everywhere because her driver's license had been suspended as part of her sentence. I heard from mutual friends that she seemed genuinely remorseful, that she was seeing a therapist and attending support group meetings for people who had been involved in fraudulent relationships. She asks about you, one friend told me. She wants to know if you're doing okay, if you're dating anyone. What did you tell her? I told her it wasn't my place to share information about your life. I was grateful for that boundary. Emily had lost the right to know about my life when she chose to destroy it. Kyle's wife Stephanie and I stayed in touch after his conviction. She was going through her own legal battles, trying to recover assets he had hidden or stolen during their marriage. I keep wondering if there were signs I missed, she told me during one of our phone conversations. Red flags I ignored because I wanted to believe in our marriage. There were signs in my case too, I admitted. But they were so small, so easily explained. And I loved her, so I chose to trust her explanations. Do you think they really loved each other? Kyle and Emily? It was the same question that haunted me. I think they loved the idea of each other. The excitement, the secrecy, the feeling of being chosen. But real love doesn't require destroying other people. Stephanie agreed to testify at Kyle's parole hearing when the time came, to ensure he served his full sentence. I agreed to do the same. As Olivia grew from an infant to a toddler, she began to look more like Emily. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same stubborn chin. Sometimes, looking at her, I would feel a stab of pain, not because she reminded me of Emily but because Emily was missing all of these moments. First smiles, first words, first steps, all happening in supervised visits or not at all. When Olivia was 18 months old, Emily's probation officer called me. Mr. Richards, I wanted to let you know that Emily has violated the terms of her probation. She failed to report for her scheduled meeting and hasn't been seen at her job for 3 days. My first thought was panic. What if she tried to take Olivia? But Olivia was safe with me at home. My second thought was sadness. Emily had been doing well, following all the rules, rebuilding her life slowly. What had happened? 3 days later, Emily was found in a hotel room in Las Vegas. She had taken a bus there with her last paycheck, checked into a cheap room, and apparently planned to disappear entirely. But she couldn't go through with it. She called her probation officer from the hotel room and asked to be brought back. I can't keep running, she told the officer. I can't keep trying to escape what I did. Her probation was revoked, and she was sentenced to 6 months in county jail for violation of terms. I didn't visit her in jail, but I did write her a letter. Emily, I wrote, I know you're struggling with guilt and shame about what happened. I know you feel like you've lost everything and there's no point in trying to rebuild. But Olivia needs you to be strong. She needs you to become the person you should have been all along. Don't give up on yourself because if you do, you're giving up on her too. I never heard back from her, but her probation officer told me she had kept the letter and read it often. When Emily was released from jail, she was required to move to a halfway house and start over again. New job, new living situation, new restrictions. She got work as a night cleaner in an office building, a job that allowed her to avoid most human contact while she worked through her shame. Our court-ordered family counseling sessions were awkward and painful. Emily, Olivia, me, and a therapist trying to figure out how to be some version of a family despite everything that had happened. Olivia needs to know both of her parents, the therapist explained. She needs to see that despite your differences, you can cooperate for her benefit. It was hard advice to follow. Every time I looked at Emily, I remembered the betrayal. Every time Emily looked at me, she was reminded of what she had lost. But slowly, over months of supervised visits and family counseling, we found a way to coexist for Olivia's sake. Emily never asked for forgiveness and I never offered it. But we learned to communicate about our daughter's needs without destroying each other in the process. When Olivia turned 2, Emily asked if she could give her a birthday present. Of course, I said. She brought a small photo album filled with pictures of Emily's own childhood, her parents, her grandparents, Olivia's family history that would otherwise be lost. I want her to know where she came from, Emily explained. Not the bad parts but the good parts. The parts worth preserving. It was the first genuinely selfless thing I had seen Emily do since before the affair began. Kyle was released from prison after serving 2 years of his 3-year sentence. His parole officer contacted me to let me know he was required to stay away from both Emily and me as part of his release conditions. But Emily told me during one of our exchanges that Kyle had tried to contact her. He wanted to meet to talk about what happened, she said. What did you tell him? I told him I never wanted to see him again. That he had destroyed enough lives. Do you mean that? She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since before everything fell apart, complete honesty. Luke, I spent 2 years thinking about what I did and why I did it. Kyle didn't force me to have an affair. He didn't force me to steal money or forge documents. He gave me an opportunity to make terrible choices and I took it. But they were still my choices. It was the closest thing to taking full responsibility that I had ever heard from her. I'm glad you understand that, I said. I understand a lot of things now. I understand that I threw away the best thing in my life for something that was never real. I understand that I hurt you in ways I can never repair. And I understand that the only thing I can do now is try to be a good mother to Olivia, even if I can never be your wife again. We had been divorced for over a year by then, but hearing her say those words out loud felt like the final closing of that chapter of our lives. As Olivia grew older and more verbal, she began asking questions about why Mommy didn't live with us, why she only saw Mommy at the special building with the nice lady who watched them play. I tried to answer her questions in age-appropriate ways, but it was difficult. How do you explain betrayal and consequences to a 3-year-old? Mommy made some bad choices, I would tell her. But she loves you very much and she's working hard to make better choices now. Emily's supervised visits eventually became unsupervised visits, then overnight visits as she proved herself reliable and stable. The process took 3 years, but gradually she earned back some parental rights. By the time Olivia was 4, Emily was allowed to have her for dinner once a week and 1 overnight visit per month. It wasn't much, but it was progress. During one of our scheduled exchanges, Emily asked me a question that caught me off guard. Are you dating anyone? Why do you ask? Because Olivia mentioned someone named Rachel and I wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure whoever she meets is good to her. I had been seeing Rachel for about 6 months. She was a teacher at Olivia's preschool, patient and kind, nothing like the drama and chaos that had defined my marriage to Emily. Rachel is very good to Olivia, I said. And to me. Emily nodded. Good. You deserve to be happy. So do you, Emily? When you're ready. She smiled sadly. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. I don't know if I deserve to be happy after what I did. Everyone deserves a chance to start over. Even you. It was the most civil conversation we'd had since before the affair began. Now, as I finished telling this story, Olivia is 5 years old. She's smart and funny and resilient, somehow managing to thrive despite the chaos of her early life. Emily has been clean and sober for 3 years, employed steadily for 2 years, and has never violated her parole conditions since that one trip to Vegas. Kyle moved to another state after his parole ended. I heard from Stephanie that he violated his parole conditions and went back to prison for another year. Some people never learn. Rachel and I got married last year. Olivia was our flower girl, wearing a dress that Emily had helped her pick out during one of their visits. Emily came to the wedding. Not as a guest, but to drop Olivia off and pick her up afterward. She met Rachel briefly and they were polite to each other. She seems lovely, Emily told me afterward. She is. Take care of each other. We will. The best revenge, I learned, isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation. The best revenge is living well, building something better from the ashes of what was destroyed. Emily lost everything, her marriage, her home, her reputation, her freedom, most of her time with her daughter. But the real punishment wasn't what the courts imposed. The real punishment was having to live every day knowing that she had destroyed something good for something that was built on lies. Kyle lost his freedom, his wife, his victim's money, and eventually his parole. But his real punishment is being the kind of person who can only find meaning by destroying other people's lives. I lost my innocence, my trust, and my first marriage. But I gained my daughter, learned the value of honest relationships, and built a new life based on truth instead of deception. In the end, justice isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just the slow, steady process of consequences playing out over time. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone else's bad choices destroy your capacity for good ones. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.